says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you lusting is the one you're loving?
I have a lot of thoughts that I may or may not share because I don't want to. I don't want to put my thumb on the scale because I feel like, I don't want to influence people one way or the other. This is why I'm voting for Biden when it's time to vote, because there's only two options. However, I would love for there to be other options, and there just aren't. So I'm gonna do what we got to do for survival. But at the meantime, I'm behind the scenes picking and plotting and doing all of that. For you, Cornel West is seen as somebody that should have a seat at the table, should be bringing ideas to the table. We should be listening. Not saying cast your vote for him. Me personally, are you saying cast a vote for him in a general election?
I'm not saying cast a vote for Cornel West whatsoever. I am saying reject any notion that Cornel West is non-qualified or non-competent to participate in American democracy, a man of his intellectual accomplishment. Now, I think about the great Ossie Davis, and I talk about this often. One of the highlights of my life was being 21 years old and sitting in an empty Bob the Chef's in Boston, Massachusetts, with me, Ossie Davis, and my friend Dick Gregory, who set it up. He was a friend and mentor of mine from St. Louis, right? And so this is perhaps the greatest day of my life, and I didn't have 3 kids and got married 2 times, right? So just keeping it real about what it was. And I think about Ossie Davis's eulogy for Malcolm X when he says very explicitly, there will be those who tell us to revile him and to run from his memory, and that he is an enemy of the black man, and that he is dangerous to us. There will be those who will tell us to run away from these type of people. And Ossie says, and we will smile and say to them, did Brother Malcolm ever do a mean thing? Was he ever engaged in any violence? Did he himself ever oppress anyone? And if you think about Cornel West, I'm not saying he's Malcolm X, but he is certainly one who has taken up the Malcolmian legacy of advocacy for those who have had less and who have had what Howard Thurman says, their backs against the wall at any given time in human history, particularly in this country. For Cornel West to have taken up that legacy, this is what that looks like. This is what Ossie Davis was saying. There will be those who will tell us that he is a menace. There will be those who tell us that he is the problem, not Trump, not white supremacy, not white. He is the problem with progress in this country. There will be those who tell us to flee from his memory. And for those who choose, everybody wants to be Malcolm, everybody wants to be the next great advocate. Well, you have to know that there will be those in power, James Carville, who tell us to tell black people, it is in our best interest to reject you, right? Because your thoughts, the way you articulate them, are fundamentally part of making the system a little bit more fairer, a little bit more fairer. And of course, we know Democrats don't want that, but James Carville reminds us, I'm sorry, of course we know Republicans don't want that, but James Carville reminds us that a whole lot of Democrats don't want that either, right?
I was going to say, you didn't really slip, because I when people say both parties are the same, I reject that because they're not policy-wise. But the people in both parties, right? The people in both parties are the same when we talk about human beings, who may put a D next to their name, but still operate under the same notion that you and I don't deserve rights, and they just, it's distasteful. I could never vote for Trump, but you're not voting for freedom for everybody. So I can't even, lean in, although the policies are not the same. And if we're being honest, the Democratic Party to me is right now, black people are the backbone. We gave you the presidency in 2020. We saved the Senate for you in 2022 with Warnock in Georgia. That was black people, period, right? And if you don't double down on not just supporting black candidates, but also supporting agendas that disproportionately impact black people, especially in the wake of the dismantling of voting rights, affirmative action, and all the other D&I and everything else that's happening in this country at the exact same time. If you as a party are not there to support, then I want to, ask the question, like, why do you expect to get people to show up to vote for you?
Well, let's be clear. The Democratic Party is a multifaceted, multimedia corporation, which is run by privileged, moneyed white people. It existentially relies on the participation and cooperation of black folks. but it is not owned nor run by Black folks, right? Its ongoing viability is almost inherently and existentially tied to Black folks viewing us, if not favorably, at least as the better of two evils. But to be clear, the stakeholders, shareholders, and operators of the multiple corporate entities that amount to what we proverbially and colloquially call, quote unquote, the Democratic Party is largely run by moneyed and privileged and highly educated white folks in New York, LA, and San Francisco, and DC, yep. Right? And so they need our votes. That is our leverage in this situation. But the Democratic Party is racist because it's run by privileged, moneyed white folks on the coastal elites, right? And that's just, and look, I'm a member of the Democratic Party, right? And so that's just what it is. And something that's run by coastal elites, mostly white, but definitely privileged, will never be an egalitarian enterprise, right? That's across industries, right? So the one unique space that we do have in American politics is that that institution is necessarily reliant upon our participation, right?
So should
and what do we get in
demand,
exchange for that?
I was gonna say, shouldn't we demand, like, so my thing has been over the last several years is hoping, trying to cultivate a mechanism to hold accountable, right? When President Obama was elected, I had some discussions with people who had access, and they were more interested in being invited to the Super Bowl parties and taking those pictures and being an advisor without any pressure, having access without any accountability. And I was so disappointed to this day. Like, you had an opportunity to do something. And I also excoriated Cornel West and Tavis Smiley, because it seemed like they were being very petty and bitter because they didn't get an invite. And so their accountability rang, hollow, because you prefaced it with, I didn't get invited to the White House, as opposed to doing what you should have been doing, which is, so this, I don't put them in the Malcolm category, because there's some pettiness there that you can't. Exist.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, there are substantive criticisms of Cornel West, right? Both on his intellectual and scholarly content, as well as on his personal politics. There are absolutely substantive criticisms of Cornel West, but objectively, he is not a menace. You understand?
No, he's not a menace. No,
that was the language of J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO, right? Those are the people who told us that not Malcolm X, but Dr. King was a menace, was the greatest threat to American democracy as a charismatic Negro, right? That is effectively what James Carville, who is one of the architects of the modern Democratic Party, 50% of the American ruling structure, he said Cornel West is a menace. Again, I go back to Ossie Davis's eulogy. Has he ever done a mean thing? Has Brother Cornel West ever done a mean thing? Has he ever oppressed anyone? Was he himself ever associated with any acts of violence? That's just not the case, right? It's an objective untruth. And so to think that somebody who I line up on the same side of the ball as you is willing to view our best in that way shows us that not only is the Democratic Party still led by fundamentally engaged white supremacists, but it shows that American politics is not salvific activity. We are not to achieve our salvation as a people from American politics. That is a major part of it, but that is not the only thing that's ever going to liberate our people, because ultimately the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, is one of the master's tools. And to finish that phrase in its fullness for you who, you brought it up at the beginning, but just full circle, is one of the master's tools. And the master's tools will never destroy the master's house. That is not ours. That is sister, what's our sister's name, who just recently transitioned to become one of the ancestors who wrote that book? I'm sorry, I got to Google that just to give her props, because you and I didn't make up that phrase, and I want her to not be invisible.
Audre Lorde. Was it Audre
Lorde?
Yes.
Sister Audre Lorde. Queen Audre Lorde. The master's tools will never destroy the master's house. And the Democratic Party, I'm a card-carrying member, is still one of the master's tools.
She smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you're lusting is the one